Hi, I'm Kate Lamanna, an executive functioning coach and learning specialist. I teach parents how to identify the executive functioning skills behind their child's struggles and use practical strategies that build confidence, reduce conflict, and create greater independence at home and at school. There's a version of this that is very hard to say out loud because it sounds like criticism of parents who are doing everything right. Picture the parent who is at the kitchen table every night. They've broken the assignment into smaller pieces before the child even sits down. They put the phone in another room. The timer is ready. They stay close for every question. They've learned to hold their tone even when the resistance spikes. They don't lose their patience the way they used to. They read the books, listen to the podcasts, try 3 different systems in the last 2 years. That parent, the most involved and the most committed one in the room, is often the one making the problem harder to solve. Not because they're doing anything wrong, because they're doing something that looks entirely right, feels like love, and is quietly keeping their child from developing the very skills they need most. I want to walk you through exactly how that happens, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it changes the whole way you think about what support is actually supposed to look like. In the last video, I talked about task initiation as a specific executive functioning skill, the internal starter motor, the bridge between knowing what to do and actually beginning. And I mentioned that when you remind your child a few times and they finally sit down, what you've done is serve as an external trigger. You provided the activation signal their brain wasn't generating on its own. That gets them. That gets the evening done. It almost never builds the skill. Here's what I actually want to get at today. Here's what I actually want to get at today. What happens over time when the external trigger is reliably available every single evening? The brain learns from what it has to do. That's not philosophy. That's how neural pathways develop. When a skill gets practiced consistently, it gets stronger. When something else is doing the job so the skill doesn't have to engage, the skill stays exactly where it is. Developing a skill requires actually doing the thing, struggling with it, getting partway, stalling, trying again. The struggle isn't the problem. The struggle is the mechanism. When we remove the struggle to make the evening smoother, we also remove the process through which the skill actually gets built. When you sit at the table and stay available, when you watch the clock and remind them how much time has passed, when you check in and ask where they are on the assignment, when you notice the backpack still in the hallway at 9 p.m. and mention it before bed, you're doing all of it because you don't want your child to fall behind. And every single one of those things is also doing the cognitive job that their brain needs to learn to do it for itself. That's the part that's genuinely hard to sit with. Your support is real. It keeps the evening functional. It's getting work done that might otherwise not happen. It's probably preventing a lot of conflict that would otherwise blow up. But it's also substituting for the skill instead of developing it. Think about a physical analogy. If someone breaks their ankle, a crutch is exactly the right support. It protects the injury. It allows healing. It lets them keep moving while things recover. But if they use that crutch for 2 years past when the bone has healed, the leg doesn't get stronger. It actually gets weaker. The muscle doesn't rebuild because it doesn't have to. The crutch that was a solution becomes the reason the leg can't stand on its own. Not because anyone made a mistake, because the support stayed past the moment when the work needed to shift back to the leg. Most parents in this situation aren't using a temporary crutch. They're running a full-time support system every single evening, year after year. And the executive functioning skills that we're supposed to be developing over all that time are the skills that haven't had to work. Here's the pattern I see consistently. A child who couldn't start homework independently in the 5th grade still can't start it independently in 9th grade. 4 years older, 4 more years of evening support, the skill hasn't moved because it never had to engage. The external system was always there to handle it. I keep having some version of the same conversation with parents who can't figure out why nothing has changed. When I ask what the support has looked like over the years, they describe it in detail. The table, the timer, the check-ins, the reminders. And when I ask whether any of that has shifted in terms of how much their child has to do independently, the answer is usually no. Not because those parents weren't paying, not because those parents weren't paying attention, because the goal was getting the work done, not building the capacity to do it. I want to name the belief that makes this so hard to change because it comes entirely from a loving place. The belief is if I stop helping, my child will fail. They're not ready to do this alone. I step back, the homework doesn't get done. The grade drops, and I've let them down. That fear is understandable. It's rooted in real experience. You've seen what happens when things aren't managed. You've lived through those consequences. You're not imagining the risk. But the belief underneath the fear, the one that says the only two choices are I manage everything or everything falls apart, that's the belief worth questioning. Because there is a third option, and it doesn't ask you to abandon your child or withdraw from support. It asks you to change your role. The shift I come back to most often is this: from external brain to skill coach. External brain handles the cognitive work on someone else's behalf. It monitors, reminds, initiates, tracks, and keeps the operation running. It works well in the short term, and it's completely replaceable. The moment it steps away, the operation stops because the operation was never actually running independently. A skill coach does something different. A skill coach focuses on the skill itself, not just on whether the outcome happened tonight. A skill coach is asking, what is the smallest piece of this that my child could initiate without me? What does it look like to take one step back from there when I'm currently where from what does it look like to take one step back from where I'm currently standing? Where is the edge of the current ability? And how do I position myself right at the edge instead of well inside of it? An external brain sits at the table and reminds them to start. A skill coach says, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to get started on your own, and I'll check in after. One is doing the initiating. One is doing the initiating. The other is creating the condition where the child has to initiate. Those two things look nearly identical from the outside. Inside, they produce completely different outcomes over time. That's a different job. But what it produces is something that is managing the outcome. But what it produces is something that managing the outcome never does. A child whose actual capacity changes. What I see most often is a parent who is operating 3 steps ahead of where their child needs them to be. Not because the parent doesn't want their child to be independent, because the parent is carrying the anxiety about what happens if the child stumbles. And stepping back, even slightly, feels like creating risk on purpose. Here's a different way to think about what's actually at risk. The risk of stepping back and having a hard week is real. The homework doesn't get done, the grades slip, there's a conversation with the teacher that you'd rather not have. The risk is never stepping back. The risk of never stepping back is also real. It's quieter. It builds over years. It's a child at 17 who still cannot organize a week without someone managing the structure for them. A college freshman in a dorm, a college freshman in a dorm room calling in panic because there's no external brain available and they never had to develop it on their own. A young adult who reaches the first genuinely independent chapter of their life without ever having practiced the skill because someone was always there to run it for them. Both risks are real. The question is, which one is getting your attention right now? What most parents haven't had yet is a clear picture of what it actually looks like to step back in a way that's gradual, intentional, and matched to where the child is right now. Not a dramatic withdrawal, not you're on your own now, a careful shift in position, close enough to catch them if they fall, far enough back that the internal system has to start working. That's the core of what I teach in the ADHD independence method. It's built for parents who are already putting in the real effort and want to make sure that the effort is actually building their child towards independence, not quietly extending dependence without realizing it. We go through the full executive functioning picture. We identify the specific skills that are lagging for your child, and I walk you through exactly what it looks like to shift from external brain to skill coach in a way that's realistic. It doesn't require things to get significantly worse before they get better. The link to register is in the description. And if you're still here, don't miss the next video, because there's one specific thing most parents try when they realize the current approach isn't working. They sit down and have a... You have to pause that. Hold on. That was bad. So that was bad. Okay. Hold on. I'm not redoing this whole thing. Okay. And if you're still here, don't miss the next video, because there's one specific thing that most parents try. Because there's one specific thing most parents try when they realize the current approach isn't working. They sit down and have a good conversation. Calm, thoughtful, clear one about responsibility and expectations and what independence is supposed to look like. I want to show you exactly why that conversation, even when it goes really well, almost never produces lasting change on its own. That's the next one.